There are two ways to get people to take action. One is to inspire that action, make the value prop or make it so enticing that they want to. And two is to reduce friction.
On this episode, I'm speaking with Sydney Weber, marketing lead at Updater, where she focuses on B2B marketing to multifamily operators. Sydney has a decade of multifamily experience, with the majority being in marketing on both the operator and vendor sides. She's passionate about telling customer stories and building scalable, repeatable playbooks that empower scrappy teams to do less with more. In 2022, her podcast, Renter Obsessed, won the Platinum.com award and was the first official podcast of the Multifamily Social Media Summit. Sydney's shared marketing strategies as a main stage speaker at multiple AIM conferences and has been featured in Globe Street, Multifamily Insiders, and Multi-Housing News. Without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Sydney. All right, Sydney, here we are. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's an honor, it's a privilege, it's a pleasure to have you on. You've been out and about and kind of flexing your marketing skills in the multifamily space for a few years now, and I came across you maybe 12 to 18 months ago at this point, so it's been fun watching your journey, and I'm excited to tell your story and have you give us a little insight on how to be a better marketer.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I always like to jump in with a kind of background story, where you came from, what your family was like, what your town was like. Did you grow up on a farm? You know, what all those details were. And from what I know, you grew up in LA County, and you called it a jungly forest with which you lived in. So let's jump off there. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I grew up in just like a normal suburban neighborhood in Torrance, North Torrance, which is in LA County. Not the nicest neighborhood, but also not the worst neighborhood. All the houses were kind of like that, 1950s stucco style. But my dad was a swimming pool designer, and the house we lived in was tiny. And when I was a preteen, they decided to remodel it. But instead of hiring an architect, my swimming pool designer dad designed our house. So it was very strange looking. It had a big stained glass window. It was oddly shaped, but it was really cool. And so he was really into landscaping. He put a swimming pool in our tiny backyard. He called it a spool, like half spa, half pool. It was like a little grotto with trees. And because he did such great work selling pools, all of the contractors loved him. And so he went to work one day saying, just put a little water feature, like a couple rocks with a trickle. And he comes back from work that day, and the team has built this insane waterfall grotto, unbeknownst to him, for free. It was the wildest thing. It was so cool. So I'm a redhead, so of course I just would tie my ankles together and pretend I was a little mermaid all the time.
That's really cool. I remember when we were talking first about that project, that it kind of felt like a little bit of a mirage and kind of this jungly wonderland. And you told me, and I wrote this down, that you wanted to find a place with a jungly forest to call your own one day. And I thought that was really sweet, because one of the first things I noticed about your background when we first started connecting was all of the plant life that you have in your office there. Does that tie back to those early years with your dad in the backyard and kind of the pool space?
I just feel like there's never been a point in my life where I didn't feel more comfortable in a forest or nature environment. We did all of our trips were camping growing up. And as you know, I have ruined this for so many people. People love LA. And I say, it's just all concrete. Everything is just concrete. And if you look around, it's so gray and it's so sun drenched too. So there's not a lot of variation in colors. And don't get me wrong, it's a great city. There's so much to do there. I enjoy visiting, but I needed to live somewhere with richer colors. And growing up, I always wanted to live on a street where the trees touched in the middle, like the neighbors across the street went over like a little cave. And where I grew up, you had to be extremely rich to live on a street like that. And I moved to Portland when I was right after college. I was 20. And a few years later, was able to buy a house, and I live on a street where the trees touch in the middle because of Portland. And it was much more affordable for me.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to hear more about Portland. But before we get there, from my understanding, there's this other part of your background, which I think is really cool, very unique. And that is that you wanted to be on Broadway as a kid. And so the dream of being a Broadway star, it sounds like, extended from high school and well into college. So I know that's not multifamily, it's not marketing, but I think it's a really unique aspect of your background. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. And you know what? There are a lot of hidden theater kids scattered throughout multifamily. If you start talking about it, they will emerge. I've met a lot of them. I started doing theater when I was 7. I was so shy, I would not talk to a single person. So my mom was like, what do I do with this shy child? So she put me in a musical. And from there, I was obsessed. I did maybe 3, 4 musicals a year from the time I was 7 till after college, like every single year, relentlessly. I never played a sport. I only did theater. That was my entire life. I wasn't really into like film acting that much. I did a couple little tiny things, but that's all I wanted to do was theater and sing and dance. And I got to do a lot of really great stuff, and it was really fun. And it really was my obsession my entire childhood. I just imagined that's what I'd keep doing.
So did you end up going to a traditional school for theater, or how does that work in that sort of industry? I'm not really up to speed on that.
You know, while the dream of being on Broadway is not very practical, I was still a very practical child, and I had this intense fear of student loans and debt. I did not really, I was realistic in the sense that if I continue to pursue theater, I'm probably not going to make very much money. And so I didn't want to spend a bunch of money to go to college to study a thing that wouldn't have good return on my investment, essentially. So I ended up finding this amazing 2-year theater conservatory in California. So I had like in-state tuition. So it was very affordable. It's called PCPA. And it was such an incredible program. I mean, we'd have equity, which is like the union for theater, equity teachers that would be the stars of the shows at night. So like if we would get cast in those shows, we'd be getting equity union points while we were still in school. So it wasn't like a college production. It was like it was the premier professional theater in Central California that just happened to have a school attached. And it was a really cool program. It was only 2 years. There were only 30 kids got in per year. So it was a very intimate program, and we did it all. We had acting classes, we had singing and dance, all of it. Production, I had to do spot op ones for like crew work, just to get a feel for it. But it was a really great experience. And honestly, I feel like my theater background has prepared me more for the workforce than I could have ever imagined.
Oh, really? Why so?
Well, I can nail a job interview, I'll tell you that. I just think the ability to think on your feet, move really quickly, be super adaptable, be very aware of your surroundings at all times, have a very deep curiosity about the human condition and why people make the choices they make, and how they might react to certain things or how certain things might make them feel. The storytelling aspect of it. I'm putting together a booth for Updater right now, which is where I work, a conference booth that is very reminiscent of like a theater set instead of a corporate booth. And there's so many elements of my theater background that I've been able to bring into my work, which makes a lot of sense that I ended up in marketing, because it's definitely one of the more creative career journeys that are available.
Well, let's talk about your transition back to Portland. So you were in school, you were in the theater mindset, and I'm curious what drew you to Portland. Obviously, early on in the conversation here, you're talking about nature and trees touching, and you sort of found that spot once you landed in Portland. But was there anything in particular that kind of pulled you to the Pacific Northwest, or was it just like, hey, seems like a cool city?
Every single one of my instructors at college was like, do not move to Portland. You need to move back to LA or to New York or something, Chicago, anywhere. Don't move to that small town. It's not that small, but it's too small to make a living doing theater. I'll tell you that. And I said, no, I'd rather live a happy life in nature than the grind of 20 auditions in a week. So I think maybe I'm going to let that dream just like settle for a moment. But when I was in high school, one of my best friends, she was a year older than me. She moved up to Eugene, which is about an hour and a half south of Portland. And I went to visit her during spring break, and it was magical. She took me to a forest. I know that sounds so silly, but truly, like, if you're an LA kid who hasn't really moved or been anywhere else, going to a forest in Oregon blew my freaking mind. And I was like, I have to live here. It's magic. And I feel that way sometimes in the winter, I'm like, ugh, why do I live here? And then in the summer, I'm like, wow, I'm so lucky to live here.
Yeah, right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and start to talk about your early career influences, because I know there is a waffle window story that I want to sort of pull out of the archives and tell the listeners about, because it's all a part of your journey that started, not in multifamily, but kind of ended up getting you there. So let's talk about waffle window, kind of those early jobs. And then there's this moment when Disney came to town. So I'll just kind of leave that out there as a teaser, but kind of talk us through that experience.
Wow, you get deeper than any other podcast host that I've ever spoken to. You're getting my life story. So when I first moved to Portland, clearly I had no job. And so I had this philosophy that I actually was in a competition. I moved here with a boy. We broke up shortly after. It was just like, we both wanted to move here. So it was great. We were like, who can get a job fastest? And he has special skill. He was like a bike mechanic, and there's a million bike shops in Portland. So he's like, oh, I'm totally going to get a job first. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a stack of resumes. I'm going to walk up and down Hawthorne, which is like a really cool, trendy street with a bunch of businesses in Portland. And I walked up and down the street, and I walked into restaurants, and I acted like a Karen. And I was like, can I speak to your manager? As if I was some disgruntled customer. And then when they give me the manager, because obviously they're going to, then I would totally change my entire personality and be like, hey, I'm Sydney, I'm looking for a job. And it worked at one of the restaurants. They're like, the owner is here. And she came out and she's like, hey, I don't have time to interview you. Just walk me to my car. I'm going to Costco. So I walked her to her car, and she asked me about my experience. I'd had a million hat and apron jobs all throughout high school already. So she gave me the job. She called me like 2 hours later and gave me the job. So it's great. I worked there for a while. Then ultimately I ended up, I was still doing theater and dancing, and I went to a call for Disney, and they were doing a dance call at a local dance studio in Portland called Fred Astaire, which is actually a chain. So you may have heard of it. There's like Fred Astaire and Arthur Murray, and they were just using the studio. They rented out the space, and I was a pretty good dancer. Like I stayed to the very end, but then they're not considering you for a Disney princess if they only take a picture of the front of your face and not your profile. I don't really have the Disney princess profile. I don't think this nose is quite right. But anyway, it did not work out. But the owner of the studio came up to me after the show, or after the audition, and she's like, hey, are you interested in becoming a ballroom dance instructor? And I wasn't. But I said yes, because I wanted to take free ballroom dance classes because I was broke as hell. And so I ended up just like thinking I was going to take a few free dance lessons from them, and ended up being there for 3 years, competing professionally all around the country in ballroom. And it was awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic. Authentic delivers premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Our proven approach aims to accelerate leasing velocity, boost rental rates, and increase long-term value. Simply put, we see brand as a business asset. You can find out more at authenticff.com. So what is I'm trying to wrap my head around like the ballroom dancing life. So you go in, you're teaching lessons, but you're also doing your own performances. You're traveling around. That sounds exhausting at some point, right? Physically, mentally, I'm sure that got tired. What for you said you were there about 3 years. What for you was the moment where you're like, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to transition out of this?
Yeah, it sounds like such a glamorous job. And people would be like, oh my God, you're a professional ballroom dancer. And I wear these like Swarovski crystal dresses all the time. It was very glamorous for 5% of the job. But 95% of that job is selling dance lessons to people and then walking them around in circles while they step on you or argue with each other. So it felt like partially partially it was a teaching job, partially it was a sales job, and partially it was like a marriage counselor job. It was very strange. But you know what? It taught me some really important skills that I will never take for granted. As a 20-year-old who literally could not afford to take dance lessons from my own self, I was so afraid to talk about money. I'd be selling these it was $130 for a 40-minute dance lesson with me, which was an insane amount of money. I think that's still insane. But I was selling these packages of dance lessons for like $5,000 to these people. And I was so afraid. And I was like, oh, it was just there. I had a lot of barriers. And I was told by one of the other instructors or the owner at the company, they're like, don't assume anything financially about anyone. Don't assume that that is a lot of money for these people. Like those two are lawyers. This is their hobby that brings them closer together in their marriage. You know what you're worth, and you're creating value, and a dollar is different to every single person. And that was really valuable moving into multifamily. And like, some of these luxury buildings, a lot of us would never be able to afford to live in. And it can be really scary to sell something that you can't personally afford. But when you stop making judgments on people, like assuming what is a lot to someone, it puts you in a much better position from a sales perspective.
No, that's a really great takeaway. That's a really great takeaway. And I think especially for new recruits, new hires into the multifamily space, I mean, that's a really great thing to keep in mind, because it's one thing to think about it through the lens of our own upbringings and experiences, right? And another entirely to sort of set that aside and just do the job and sell it to people that want to buy it. And I think that's there's a line in the sand there. And I think that's a really great point that you made. Well, let's actually talk about multifamily, because
Great.
You are a force to be reckoned with in multifamily. And I always want to know like how people found their way into multifamily. Like, did you set your eyes on working at an apartment building? Did multifamily find you? What was that like?
Well, I was living in an apartment building called Devereaux Glen. It was a Greystar property, but it was Riverstone at the time. Shout out to the old days of Riverstone.
Shout out. Yeah.
I was living there, and I just decided very impulsively to quit my job as a ballroom dance teacher. I was so over it. I do this thing when I get over it, it's very hard for me to like stick it out. So I have to stay engaged, and I was done. And so I quit, and I did not have a job lined up. So I walked into the leasing office of my apartment complex thinking like, oh, maybe I can work. I need to reduce my monthly expenses because I don't have a job. Luckily, I was living with my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. So he was, sorry, footing the bill for a lot of things. But I walked into the leasing office thinking I can reduce our monthly expenses if I work here part-time and get a discount or free rent. I had no idea how this whole thing worked. And they were like, no, we're not going to give you free rent, but we have a leasing agent position open. Do you want to interview for it? And I got the job right away as a full-time leasing agent, and really just thought it would be a little thing that I did for a while.
So that first leasing agent job, did you feel like it was sales? Did it feel like you were bringing forth some of the experiences that you had with your ballroom dancing kind of like techniques, or was it a whole new world for you?
Oh no, I was good. I was so good. And it was so fun to be good at it. Selling ballroom dancing is hard. You're selling an intangible product that you have to then go teach. That is such a commodity. Like nobody needs to take super expensive ballroom dance lessons. So you have to be really good at sales. And so I came into this role having a really good sales background. And I remember like shadowing some people in the beginning. And there was this guy at the property who'd been there forever, Joe, who was like the top, that person who's like known as being the best salesperson. But it was pretty competitive too. But it was so fun. It was my very first desk job. And honestly, it blew my mind that they would pay me to sit down. I had never been paid to sit down. I either was standing up behind like the waffle window, or waiting tables, working at Starbucks, or dancing. And I was like, wow, this job is pretty cool. There was a little bit of a learning curve. I've never used a computer for work. There was a lot of different softwares to learn, but they had really great training in place. But I was good at it pretty fast, I'd say.
So how long did you stay at that first role, which I believe is now a Greystar?
Yeah, I was there during the transition. I don't remember. Okay. I feel like it was probably about a year. And then I quit because, leasing agents don't get weekends off. And I was getting back into doing theater. I was doing theater in Portland. And so I took a temp job as a temp leasing agent, which was wild. I would go to a new property every single day. One would be like the highest end A class, and one would be like really sketchy.
Interesting.
And one property that I went to was so insane. They were using carbon paper for their leases. And she'd be like, I need you to compile all the leases into packets. I'm like, you ran out of mold addendum. She's like, nah, it's fine. We don't need mold addendums.
Oh no.
It was, so you know what? That was actually really great because I really honed in my skills of like being able to pick up technology really fast. I mean, I'm a millennial, so obviously I'm like pretty good at it. But I learned a bunch of different operating systems and a bunch of different properties and got a pretty good broad view of all of that. And the way I got my very first marketing job, wait, are we moving into that or no?
Let's do it. Let's move into it.
So when I was at Greystar at the full-time job, the regional manager would pop in and I would schmooze with him and made friends with him, friends-ish, like wanted him to know who I was. Because at that point, I was managing all the social media accounts for my property. I was gathering reviews, responding to reviews. I was taking on little mini marketing tasks and like Googling what marketing was and how to get into marketing. And so I expressed interest and I ended up shadowing a new marketing associate for a day. So he knew that I was interested in marketing. And then while I was temping, me and my friends started a blog called Pacific Quarter, which was like a women's lifestyle blog about the Pacific Northwest. It was really fun. We did it for a while. We did events and it was really cute. And then I started doing like social media marketing for a real estate agent. And when I was temping at one of those like really sketchy properties, there was a shooting. And so the president of the company had to go to the property and like check in with the manager. The president of the company was that old regional that I had been schmoozing with at Greystar. And he happened to have this, it was a brand new management company. It was an owner, manager, developer that was like, we're just going to do everything in-house. And so they hired him to be the president. And then he was bringing on their very first marketing hire. And he ran into me and I told him I was doing a little bit more. I embellished a lot of the things I had been working on. And he ended up giving me the job. I don't think he had been interviewed anyone else.
That's a great story. That's another, like, I'm following the theme here of the hustle. Sydney has the hustle, and I really appreciate that. A lot of employees in any industry don't necessarily have that hustle built in. So it's really cool to hear about these sort of hustle stories, whether it's going up and down Hawthorne or sort of being able to kind of move your way into your next multifamily job. How long did you stay in that position with that second job?
A long time. I was there for 5 years, which I know is not
okay.
a long. It's a long time.
It can't be that long because you're not that old. But so 5 years. Long. That's a long time.
It was an interesting role. It was a really interesting role. I started my very first job that marketing job at $18 an hour. I tried to negotiate up to 19, and they would not budge. It was very entry level. I had no support, no one around me to help. I learned everything myself, and I developed a network of marketers in the industry, local in Portland, so we can bounce ideas, which is kind of like the inspiration for what eventually my career became. But it was hard. And honestly, at that point in my career, there was a lot of really wonderful things about that company, but there was a lot of turnover in leadership, and it was just not very... my own drive pushed me forward to learn more, not a lot of nurturing from the company. And 5 years in, we all got laid off. I knew I was getting laid off for like 3 months. So I had so much time, but we all got laid off. They ended up deciding to like not do management in-house anymore. And I worked there for a long time, and I was making like what I thought was great money, ish. And I really was so worried about getting back into the job market. I thought like, oh, I don't have a college degree. I have all my experience is this one thing, and I don't know who's going to want me or if I'm even going to be able to make the same amount as I was making there. And I ended up moving to the vendor side in only being unemployed for like 2 weeks. It was incredible. And it just really showed me how powerful my network was. And building really strong relationships with my vendor partners. And I felt very fortunate. And now look at me. I mean, we've come so far.
We've come so far. It's interesting you say that. So obviously we're talking about knock. And when I got really plugged into the multifamily scene, at least from sort of like a LinkedIn networking perspective a couple years ago, that's all I remember seeing about you is sort of like Sydney and Knock, or Knock and Sydney, and you were doing such a good job of just being sort of at the forefront. You had the podcast, you had kind of a lot of just sort of like fun things happening around you that was drawing attention to obviously the work that you were doing, Knock as well. What do you feel like made that career stop so special? And maybe sort of part B would be, how did that really clarify what you are doing today in your new role? Like, how did that lead into the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to get hired on at Knock. And not only a lot of people that move from the vendors or from the operator side to the vendor side get hired in like a customer success or sales role. They get hired for their knowledge of the industry and for their network. But to move from a B2C marketing role to a B2B marketing role for a tech company was a pretty big leap. Like, you know how I hustle. So I definitely I turn the things that I work in and I relate them to a job that maybe they aren't fully related to. But the one thing that I had was my North Star was I knew the customer because I was the customer. I used Knock. I was a huge Ravy fan customer of Knock before I joined the team. And I learned a lot. I felt like a fish out of water for the first couple months. I didn't know the jargon they were using. I didn't know the tools they were using. I'd never been in Salesforce in my life. And it was so much to learn. I didn't know the dynamics of working for a tech company. I didn't know how to do B2B marketing. And honestly, a lot of the roles that I've done in my life, I didn't know how to do them going into it. And so you see the things that I do as a marketer, and a lot of people on the outside like, oh, she does things so differently. I don't have anything to pull from. I do things differently because I'm making it up as I go. I'm pulling inspiration from other industries and other people that I admire that may or may not relate to what I'm doing. And so it ends up being a little bit different and very much my own spin because I don't have a lot of historical knowledge to pull from. But the Knock job was amazing. I started the podcast. I totally ripped off Chris Walker's like Demand Gen Live format. Obviously, I have a theater background, so I can keep an audience engaged. So I had that like competitive advantage. So that was very helpful. But yeah, I loved it. It was a great company to work for. It is a great company to work for. A lot of people still work there. So.
Right. Knock still exists, doing well. Yeah. No, you told me that you were a multi-passionate generalist who wants to be doing everything.
Yeah.
End quote. Which was one of the reasons why you felt like it was time to transition and move over to Updater / Move HQ, and we can kind of get into that. But what was it about the new opportunity where you are today that pulled you in that direction, kind of thinking about the sort of multi-passionate generalist? What is that for you?
It was a really hard decision. It was such a hard decision. Knock was an incredible company, great culture, took great care of me. The real thing is Knock was at the time was like 1-2 products. And the marketing team was honestly really big for the company, in my opinion. And we all had specialties. I was the customer marketing manager. We had a brand marketing person. We had an events person. We had a person for each discipline. And that makes a lot of sense, honestly, at a big company. And it probably made good sense for Knock too, but it doesn't make sense for me because I was getting in everyone's business. And by the time it was about time for me to leave Knock, I was keeping the lights on the things that I had already created. I had my system. I was doing Renter Obsessed. I had this email sequence. I had this program. They were all running. But there wasn't really a spot at that time for me to move around. But this Updater opportunity came up. I had stayed really close in touch with them. I've been an Updater customer. I really admire them. And what I really liked and what ultimately led me to make the move was at the time when I was hired for Updater, I was hired to own one of their 3 brands. So doing every aspect of marketing, this brand had been totally like off the radar. The marketing team hadn't been focusing on it. They didn't have their designated person. Very quickly, when I joined Updater, I ended up moving to all of their brands. So now I work on marketing for Updater, Dolly, and Move HQ. Dolly's like Uber for moving. We all know what Updater is, obviously. And the Move HQ is a CRM and like app suite for moving companies. So now our marketing team we have a designer, we have like a web developer, but really like the B2B marketers are all generalists doing everything. And so that's really where I thrive. When I'm not boxed into a specific channel.
Well, we called this podcast the kind of the Lazy Marketer 101. So I really want to dive into those pillars of your work because I know you kind of bring that mindset into the work that you do day in and day out. You're trying new things, you're testing things out with the market. Sometimes they go really well. I'm sure sometimes they don't go well and you kind of let them go. I want to know, I know this is a big question, so kind of answer it how you see fit, but from a generalist marketer B2B mindset, what are your core tenets, would you say, today as a marketer, as you're kind of looking at the landscape of multifamily today?
Yeah, I'd say even broadly, the core tenets are: number one, put your customers at the center of your story. Nobody cares what you say about yourself. They care what your customers say about you. And if I have customer videos, customer quotes anywhere, I'm going to shove them in every single piece of marketing material, scatter them everywhere. I'm not going to have a customer's page. I'm going to throw a quote every single place. There's a really good website called AppQs. They're a software company, but they do such a good job of just like weaving customer quotes and faces throughout their entire website. Very good job. So that's my core tenet, like put your customers at the center of your marketing and center of your story. I think this kind of goes in line with this, and you and I talked a little bit about this, but I don't really care that much about what my competitors are doing. I don't pay that much attention to it. I don't really think about it that much, because if I'm trying to pay attention to what they're doing, then I'm inherently behind them. Right. So like they have a strategy. I'm like, oh, cool, I should have done that. Well, they already did it. What I am paying attention to is what my customers care about and what they're talking about. So I really like think about them constantly. I'm very fortunate to be in a role where I was that customer. So I have some context, but I'm not that for Move HQ or Dolly. I'd never worked in the moving industry. So that was a learning curve for me, like getting to know them and having lots of conversations. And in that same realm is talk to your customers as much as possible. Create opportunities where you do talk to them. Like Renter Obsessed was great. I had an hour to talk to the industry every single week and learn what they cared about. That's super valuable. Another thing to think about from a B2B perspective is one thing that Dimitri from Knock used to always say, which I loved, is you're either buying or building shit or selling shit. Those are the only two departments. I don't care what else you're building or selling it. Like your engineers.
That's pretty true.
So I was always on the selling shit team. And really, there are two ways to get people to take action. One is to inspire that action, make the value prop or make it so enticing that they want to. And two is to reduce friction. So while you're putting your customers at your center of your story, talking about things that they care about, positioning your product in a way that actually means something to them, you do that, you inspire action, but then you have to reduce friction. So really think about how your buyers want to buy today. They like to self-serve. They want to be able to schedule a demo on like a Calendly, Chili Piper, or whatever link and not do that back and forth. They want to see the product and get their hands on it maybe before they're ready to talk to a salesperson. Make it easy as hell to buy your product. That's really important to me.
Another thing that you mentioned to me when we were kind of putting together ideas for this podcast was the idea around scalability and automation, which I thought was really on the nose, especially for the modern marketer that, as we all know, we're being pulled in 10 different directions every day. You had some really good thoughts around that topic. So do you mind kind of talking through how you use that approach at Updater?
Yeah, if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today. I work on a very lean, mean marketing machine team at Updater. Sorry, that was like, why did I even say that? Anyway, we are scrappy as hell, and we work on 3 different brands. And specifically, I am the one that's like really focused on all 3 brands. It's a lot of work. At the same time, I got some side hustles going. I got some announcements to make later. That's a lot of work. I have so much going on. I feel like lazy is not the right word, but also it's my favorite word to describe it because I feel like it's a little clickbaity. Like, oh, she's
well, lazy. It made people listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
But really it's efficient. So we work on a lot of projects, and sometimes it feels like we're starting from nothing. And that feeling can really take up a lot of time. I don't have time. And so when I think about investing in a new channel or a new project, I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, how do I make this scalable? How do I turn this into a playbook that can be repeated by either me or someone on my team or someone else in marketing land that wants to use this strategy? And so that's been really beneficial to me because I'm able to move really fast. And so, for example, content, like customer content. I produce a ton of case studies. But I didn't come up with this term. I subscribed to Devin Reed's newsletter, and he did this whole thing about the content waterfall. So I created my own playbook for Updater called the Partner Content Waterfall. So it starts as a 30-minute Zoom call, and then it flows into 10 pieces of content with like this robust distribution strategy. So I know that if I need customer content, I record a single Zoom call and I have a whole system. It's a very like robust, big Word document. Maybe I'll put it out there in the world one day for people to see and use. But it even has ChatGPT prompts listed in there. It has instructions on how to record the video, how to edit the video. And it just makes my life so much easier. Everything's templatized. I have to do it that way. It's how I'm able to produce things really quickly. Also, I really try not to overthink. I just like put it out there. Let's fail fast. Let's iterate on everything. I've spent a lot of time on like a big, beautiful ebook in the past that 5 people downloaded, like get it out faster. And the nice thing is people want content. People are used to content, especially with TikTok, that is a little bit more rough around the edges. So you're able to produce more quickly because it doesn't have to be as beautiful and curated.
Yeah. And something else that I think that resonates really deeply for myself, and I'm sure for any marketer listening, something else that you mentioned to me was a quote from one of your colleagues, but that it made me laugh at the time. And I've been thinking about it for a while, and it's that this is PR, not ER. And I just kind of, it makes me side smile because it's so true, right? Like, it's not like we're being rushed into the emergency room, someone's on the table ready for surgery. I mean, we're sort of falling forward. We're falling on our face a lot. We're trying new things. We're trying to put together automations, and it doesn't need to be overly complicated. It doesn't need to be the perfected ebook, right? To get it dialed in. And I think that you have a good frame of reference for that mindset as you kind of speak to your marketing experience and how you look at marketing today.
Yeah. Shout out Lindsay Schober. She was the content marketer at Knock, and honestly, one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. I learned so much from her. We'd be in meetings and we'd be all stressed. And it was my first job in B2B SaaS. And I was like, everything was overwhelming. Everything was new. And we would be stressed and she'd be like, this is PR, not ER. And then we giggle and then we like feel better. And it was great.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about a couple other things while I have you, and that comes back, or my thought here comes back to some of your tips for fellow lazy marketers, or those marketers that want to kind of pull some pages from your book. One of them is a link or a sort of a how-to guide that you just put out, and the other one is this owner's mindset I want to talk about. So I know that you just put out a guide very recently, I think this month, on a new B2B review website. What is that all about?
Yeah. So it's called Revise. You've probably heard of it. A lot of people, it's really making waves. So they are, it's a review website. So it helps multifamily operators buy software or services too. I think you can buy look at different creative agencies like yourself. And it's like a G2 or a Capterra. It has a lot more features than that. You can do self-guided demos on there. But one of the things that what I did as a marketer, as I said, putting customers' voices at the center of your marketing strategy, a good way to do that is reviews. So when I was on the operator side, very into gathering as many Google reviews as possible. I had a whole strategy in place. And so when I moved over to Knock, I was the customer marketer, and I thought, that's a really great place for me to start. It's something that I know how to do. And so I developed a strategy to gather G2 reviews. G2 is a software review site that's very, very well known. Turns out not so much in the multifamily industry though. So that's where Revise came in. They have excellent SEO. Like if you Google best software for like best property management software, you probably see like G2 comparisons or whatever type of software, best accounting software. So I built a strategy around how I'd like to do that based off of what I did when I was on the multifamily side. So I implemented our first like NPS review system, not review, like a survey out to all of our customers. Right. And then from there, I built a funnel on like putting the promoters, the people that like you, into this funnel, putting the neutrals and detractors into this funnel so they can be addressed by customer success. And we ended up getting like There's so many reviews for Knock on G2. Got so many. It helps to have a product that people like. That is definitely the number one thing. Like, have good product and good service. If you're not starting there, you're in a rougher spot. Luckily, I only work for companies that have amazing products, so I'm spoiled.
There you go.
Yeah, so we had a ton of reviews on G2. We got a bunch of badges. So I had a system of how I do it. And so then I was like, well, Revise is out. Let's do the exact same thing for Updater. I ran my exact same playbook. We have 11 reviews now, which I know is not crazy. We did it a little smaller version. We didn't broadly ask our entire network. We started with a smaller group of people. But I mean, Revise just posted the other day that Updater and RealLink have the most reviews on anyone else.
I know. So, I'm jealous. Hey. I think we have 7, and so I need to get to 11 really quickly now.
Read the playbook. Like.
So, I need to go read the playbook, which, by the way, we're going to link in the show notes. So everyone listening can go get that. And everyone's going to get to 11 really quickly.
No, you're going to get to way more than 11. No, I seriously, like, steal my playbook. I don't care. Take it. You deserve it. Like, you should get reviews if you have a good product. But I walk through exactly like kindergarten level how to do every single step. Like, there's a lot of brilliant marketers that can probably skip sections, but honestly, like, any entry-level employee should be able to read that playbook and be like, oh, that's how you gather reviews. I even linked to softwares that I use for like emails and surveys, just different ones that I've used in the past. It's not a comprehensive list of softwares by any means, but it's, if you want to get started real fast and real cheap, that's your way to do it. Yeah. So check out that playbook.
I think that that really ties in nicely to what I want to talk about next. And this is something that I probably admire you for the most, because it feels very rare in the industry, especially as an owner myself. It's difficult to come across employees that are as talented as you are, but that also have this or carry this owner mindset with them. And I think that sort of loops back to, you didn't have a degree. You learned a lot of what you learned on Google. You didn't necessarily know exactly what you're doing at every new turn with every new job, but you figured it out, and you showed that you can tie what you're doing to revenue growth. And that is that owner's mindset that you have, that you've been obviously growing and harvesting over the years. Can you speak to that though? Because I think that, especially the next generation of, employees coming through multifamily needs to hear that, because that really will set you apart, as it set you apart as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Tell that to any future employers out there. No, I'm not leaving Knock. I'm obsessed.
Well, you're going to create this video clip,
I'm
right? Like,
Updater.
You'll create this video clip. You'll have it in your future resume and everything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm super happy where I'm at. I'm not leaving, everybody. I love my company. I'm the best boss in the world. But thank you for saying that. I am envisioning like a dog with a stick with a treat on the end, where I'm like running really fast after that thing. I get very hyper focused on things. And what I have done is I get hyper focused on the right things. So yes, I'm a marketer. I know what my skills are, and I know what I've done, and I know it works. But I'm not thinking about the company from a marketing perspective. One thing that I love about Updater is they're crystal clear on company goals, which is honestly can be kind of rare. I know exactly what our company needs to be profitable. Everybody's on the same page. We are on a trajectory towards profitability. We're crushing it right now. We're kind of there. But that's really where every tech company is right now. We're not like, funding is not the way it used to be. We got to be profitable. And so we know as a company how we become profitable. We know exactly the quickest way there. And so I'm going to look at everything in my sphere, like everything that I could do to make this company profitable. And it's going to allow me to ruthlessly prioritize. One thing that I can very easily find myself falling into the trap of, I'm the ideas girl. Like, I have all these ideas all the time. They can be very great and they can be very distracting. And so every time I have an idea, every time somebody comes to me with a request, I take a moment and I either think to myself or I ask them, how does this drive us towards our goal? If there isn't a crystal clear direction of how it does, we're not doing it. If we needed to keep the lights on, great. If it's like business as usual, hey, I gotta make sure we update this, sure. But if it's like a big undertaking, there needs to be a really clear path to the end goal, not the end goal for the marketing team, the end goal for the company. And then you still have multiple of those, then you weigh them against each other. Which ones like work versus proximity to the goal. Like, how do you wait? Yeah, maybe this thing is way more work, but it's going to get you way closer to your goal. Maybe this one is not very much work, but it's going to inch you along. And so you just have to prioritize. So one thing that my lazy marketer brain is, my two things that I do is, how do I make whatever I'm doing scalable so I can do it again? And how do I like ruthlessly prioritize so I'm getting as close to my goal as possible?
Sydney, as we begin to wrap up here, I'm curious, that mindset that you just talked about and sort of kind of walked us through, do you feel like that is the mindset that all multifamily employees should have in mind, sort of to tackle in their role? Is it that simple of a solution, or is it more complicated than that?
I think that I can only answer this question from my own perspective. It has very much worked for me in my career. I have been the type of person that has looked at a company and saw opportunities and came up with solutions on my own, pretty much got them 90% there, presented them on a silver platter to leadership, be like, here's your problem, here's your solution, yes or no, do you want to implement it? That was very powerful. That like really helped me move forward in my career. That might not work for everyone. I think if you're to take a step in that direction, be as educated on your company as possible. Meet with different department heads, understand their problems, understand what they're working on, understand how they impact the business, understand the business financials. If you're working in multifamily, like understand why you're operating that way, understand why these rents are that way. What can you do to get your company closer to the goal? Because if you really think about it, okay, this is going to sound terrible. Nobody cares about what you're doing. Nobody cares about you. They do as like a person, but they care about what they're working on. Like, they don't think day to day, like, I wonder what Chris is working on. I wonder what projects he's doing. No, they're all thinking about the company goal. And so take yourself away out of like your own selfish, this is what marketing should do, and this is my personal goal, and really think more holistically about the company, because it'll give you better direction on how to do your job. And if not, if you're still doing this, if you're hired to do one specific thing, at least it'll give you your why. Like, why am I doing this? How am I contributing? And then at the end of the day, you can say, wow, what I did wasn't just hamster wheel. What I did was it made major business impact. Because sometimes it feels like we're on a hamster wheel, but we're actually making major business impact.
Right. Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I would say too, the only thing I would add there is, and this is something that you already mentioned in the podcast, so, hat tip to you for this, but being always available and willing to talk to your customers. At the end of the day, it's kind of one of those scenarios where you're pulling yourself out of your own head and just getting into the mind of the customer, because it's one thing, especially as marketers, to think about, oh, well, what do I want to do here? What do I want to build? What do I want to create? But it's not about us, and it's not about what we want to do. It's about what's going to be best for our customer, and therefore best for the business. So I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. And, we make a lot of assumptions as marketers. We make a lot of assumptions as human beings. It's how we like move through life. We have to. And a lot of times those assumptions have been wrong for me. I've learned from my customers that projects that I spent a lot of time on, they did not care about, and they totally fell flat. So keeping that constant manufacture a constant feedback loop into your business, into your career, to prevent you to allow you to fail faster, essentially. Like, yeah, you're going to try that thing, but yeah, get the feedback right away. Make sure if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to drop it.
Well, let me hit you with some rapid fire questions. I always love to finish these conversations with a little extra juice here at the end. Number one, since you're a marketer, what is the most exciting marketing campaign you feel like you've seen in the last year or so?
Oh, man. Oh, okay. Design wise, I loved the Maybelline eyelashes on the trains. I thought that was really cool. I've seen a couple other augmented reality sort of. I'm
gonna find an example of that and link that in the description too, so people can check that out.
Marketing campaign. I like marketing that listens to pop culture and listens to people out in the world. Okay, this is my favorite TikTok that I've ever seen a business post. Okay. You know that trend where it's a Taylor Swift song and it's August and it's like, and it's the more like cinematic one from The Summer I Turned Pretty. Okay, this is very niche. Okay,
Okay.
there's this
Okay.
cinematic sound of the song August by Taylor Swift that's from the TV show The Summer I Turned Pretty, and it's a huge TikTok trend. Even like the Savannah Bananas baseball team is using it. Like everybody's using it, and basically it's like this big beautiful thing, and you like dramatically run off, and oh, you know, away luggage.
Yes. I have
They're
away
very
luggage.
expensive
Yep.
high-end luggage that
It's
like
not that
sometimes.
expensive. No, no, no,
Okay,
no. I don't.
I'm cheap as hell. Okay, I buy my stuff at Nordstrom Rack. Away luggage is really
Okay.
good. I want it. I haven't bit the bullet and bought it yet. They advertise everywhere, but I saw a TikTok. They reposted someone else's TikTok where they were playing that sound, and it was raining and storming outside on the tarmac, and the luggage felt like blew away, and it was just the away luggage spinning and running down the tarmac in the air at the airport and to that song, and they were like, our wheels are really good. And honestly, if they weren't,
No
it was
way.
that was a very like way too long an explanation. But the fact that they were so quick to pick up on that and to reuse it in their advertising had hundreds of thousands of likes, thousands of comments like, this is the best TikTok I've ever seen a business post. And like a business that's willing to not take themselves too seriously and not try to manufacture trends and stuff and just pull and like natural things that happen to them and like take them and run with them. That is good marketing. That
Yeah,
is
I love
good
that.
modern marketing.
All right. So one other thing here, and I always ask this to guests because I think it's a good sort of foundational question, and it's also tangible for people listening. They can just go out, get it, take a look. So one book that you would recommend right now to fellow marketers?
I don't read a ton of marketing books. I'm really more into true crime. But I did read a marketing book recently, more of like a business book that I really like. And I told you about it. It's called Growth Hacker. It's a little older. So some of the examples are from like, you know, Airbnb and like older tech companies that have been really successful. But I really like Growth Hacker because it gives you the formula to manufacture virality. And it gives you a lot of examples of how that's done. For example, when email first came out, I don't remember if it was Yahoo or whatever they used, but you'd send an email and then at the bottom would say, create your own email. And like it allowed just customers and users to spread the word of their product. And there's so many different examples in Growth Hacker that are really good. That is an excellent book. And it's a very quick read. I read it in like 2 days. There's another book called Founder Brand that Dave Gearhart, he's like a big, well-known B2B marketer. He has the biggest B2B marketing community there is. He launched a book called Founder Brand. And even if you're not a founder, I think it has some really valuable information in there, especially if you're a creator or you want to create a brand for yourself. One of my favorite quotes is social media as an opportunity to be in the room with your top customers, having intense, like really important conversations about things they care about. And it really puts into perspective, like really creating a brand for yourself and your business in the sense like being a media company, building an audience first and then launching your product. Those are two really great reads, very short reads that I totally recommend.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely put those in the show notes so everyone can go out and grab those.
I'll find that TikTok from away suitcase too.
Okay. Yes. I was
then,
going to add that as a little Easter egg in the show notes, but let's definitely get that too.
You should cut out my excessively long explanation of that TikTok. That was absolutely
No, I will not.
stupid.
We're going to leave that in. We're going to leave that in. So the only thing left to do here, Sydney, is to roll out the red carpet for you. Tell the world what you're up to and where they can find you online.
Oh my gosh, I'm doing so many things, you guys. Thank you for this perfect timing. Okay, so you know that I used to host a podcast called Renter Obsessed. It was a live weekly podcast. It was really fun. We got to hang out with our friends every single week and even have in-person events. It was very sad days when it ended. I'm starting another podcast. My new podcast is called Life After Leasing, and it's not associated with any company. It's just me and my friends creating it, a lot of the original Renter Obsessed people, and it's focused on life after leasing. So after you became a leasing agent, like where did your career go from there? So it's a lot of really strong, powerful women on the show. It's talking about our career paths, and it's really great for people that are just getting started that are like, where can this take me? And then we'll just talk to really smart people about cool things like marketing tactics and advocating for yourself in the workplace, that sort of stuff. So that's actually launching next week. Our very first episode is September 7th, and then it'll be every Thursday from there. Another thing I'm working on is will be announced. Hopefully, this podcast will come out a little bit later, but it will be announced very shortly that Revise, the website that has the reviews, is launching their own community. And I am going to be a big part of that community as an admin, facilitating conversations in there. And we'll also be hosting Life After Leasing Live on there. Another thing that I'm working on is, obviously, I work at Updater. Updater has some incredible new features in its product that people absolutely love. We're working with like Bozzuto and Greystar and Lincoln and all these top companies, and really revolutionizing the way they do move-ins and adding automation because we want to have more time back because it's PR, not ER. So that's been a really cool thing that I've been working on. So very busy, but all great stuff.
And everyone can find you on LinkedIn, right? Like if someone needed a single source of truth, find you on LinkedIn, hit you up, shoot you a DM.
Find me on LinkedIn. Pop on over to lifeafterleasing.com if you want to check out that show. Hang out with me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM. Cool. Let's be friends.
Awesome. DM friends. I love it. Sydney, thank you so much for your time today. It's been educational, insightful, and a lot of fun. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.